What's going on, guys? Danny here from Metal Couch, and 12 Days of Christmas continues to day 6. Today we're going to be talking about the debut album from the band Skullfist entitled Head of the Pack. Now, I'd only heard one song of this album for quite a long time because this album is kind of famous for this one song, and I finally decided listen to the entire album because, well, we'll talk about it and that track. But Skullfist describing their sound, it's a retro-sounding speed metal thrash kind of sound, kind of vibe. They're definitely one of those bands that are just like, hey, classic heavy metal is our thing. That's what we want to go for. That's what we want to sound like. And with that, I feel like in comparison to some of the other instruments that are present on the album, bass is there, but not really there. I mean, every once in a while you can still hear it. It's noticeable, but other than that, I can't really find it anywhere. And the guitars on this album sound, in my opinion, a little weak, but that may be due to the fact that the vocalist for Skullfist is extremely high-pitched, falsetto, and more higher-pitched Vince Neil from Motley Crue. Even to the point where I had to look up to make sure that this wasn't a woman. That's how high-pitched this is. It fooled me into thinking that this was a female lead singer, which was not. And Skullfist, I believe, are from Canada, so yay, another Canadian band that knows how to play metal, because Razor wasn't enough. So, going through some of the tracks, you open up with Head of the Pack. Right off the bat, you get the title track, and I feel like this song just ends completely abruptly, almost as if it wasn't finished. That's the kind of vibe that I got from that. Other than that, it was a really great opener to the album. It just kind of ended, though. And with the second track, Ride the Beast, we're introduced to something that's present on this track and on the track No False Metal. You get this opening from a very baritone voice that kind of sounds like the Master Control program from Tron, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just like, if you don't know that it's coming, it's kind of off-putting. You're like, wait a second, what was that? What was that? Then we move into the third track of the album, Commanding the Night, which is one of my highlights off of the album. A really, really good song. And I'm going to be using this song as a bit of an example when we get later on into this album, because this album does have its issues, but moving on further, you have Get Fisted and Cold Night and Tear Down the Wall. These three tracks are filler. I don't really think that they add any power to the album whatsoever. This album has 11 tracks on it, clocks in at 42 minutes, which is a decent-sized album, but I feel like that these tracks are really out of place and that they are not necessarily highlights or really songs that kind of fit with this album. But they're not bad songs, they're just songs that I didn't really care for. Which then we get into my main issue with this album. Now, this album is highly rated on Metal Archives. It's in the mid-90s, I believe, like a 94%. And I think because of the 3 filler tracks and Commit to Rock is where I disagree with that average. Commit to Rock is a ballad. And that's where I got that Motley Crue kind of reference, why I kind of thought that they had that kind of vibe going on. I mean, this just sounds like a track straight from the nightmare that is Bob Rock producing Dr. Feelgood. I mean, this is just not a good song. I don't like ballads. I completely despise them. I think that they have no place on an album, especially one that opened up with 3 awesome tracks, Head of the Pack, Ride the Beast, and especially Commanding the Night. Commit to Rock is not good, but then has a slight redemption with Ride On, which starts out a little slow, but then quickly picks up and helps reclaim my faith in this album. Then we have Like a Fox, which, in my opinion, if you want a good example of their solo work, like what do their guitar solos sound like, how awesome are their solos, look no further than Like a Fox. This is an extremely awesome track if you are in love with guitar solos. I mean, this is, when we were talking yesterday about Austrian Death Machine and about how they were putting solos for the sake of solos in the album, in the songs that were on that EP. This is different. They actually fit and they actually serve a purpose, and it is an awesome purpose at that. I really like a Fox. And then we close it with kind of officially close out the album with No False Metal, which is probably the most famous song off of this album, with chorus lyrics such as "No false metal, get the fuck away from me, no false metal." And this track also opens up with that Master Control Program voice, telling us that the battle rages on, where the true must keep the spirit alive. Now, having only listened to that track before listening to this full album, if you would have played Commit to Rock to Me and then played No False Metal, I would have found it completely ironic that a band that was preaching the gospel of no false metal put a ballad on their album. I'd still kind of have a bit of a problem with that, but nonetheless, No False Metal is definitely the highlight track from this album. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best track, but definitely give that track a listen if you're interested in trying to find out what this album sounds like. And then we get a cover, I think, from a band called Tokyo Blade called Attack Attack. And it's, I don't know, I've never listened to the original song, and I mean, I guess it's a decent sounding song, but it didn't really add anything to the album, in my opinion. So, Skullfist's debut album is an extremely good album, save for a few flaws. I'm not necessarily going to dock it too much for the ballad, even though I really hate ballads. If I were to give this album a grade out of 10, I would give it an 8. A very solid 8 at that. And I know I give out 8s a lot, but this is a pretty damn good album aside from a few hiccups here and there. I do recommend people listening to it and supporting this album. I haven't listened to their second album, but this was a pretty good metal album from Canada. Highly recommend it. Danny here from Metal Couch, signing out.